Good morning, church. For those of you that are visiting with us today, like Chris said, Pastor James is out today. My name is Cody Hill. I'm the student pastor here at First Baptist Church Tomball, and I'm so excited to get to preach this morning and just be a part of this. It's always so fun for us and such an awesome time. We're going to be in Genesis chapter 22 today. We're going Old Testament, and I want to talk about worship. I want to talk about not just worship in the sense of music, right, as that's a part of it, or in us gathering here, but our life being worship. Everything that we do being worship. Worshiping when it's easy, and as we're going to see today, worshiping when it's hard, right? When God calls us to do the hard things, when God calls us to step out, when God calls us out of our comfort zone and everything's falling apart, can we still worship? And will we be obedient to what God is calling us to do? So Genesis chapter 22, this is Abraham and Isaac, and this is God requesting that Abraham sacrifices Isaac. And if you've grown up in church, you've heard this story, you know this story, but I want us to look deep into this morning. So in verse 22 it says, after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, here I am, he answered. Take your son, he said, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. So Abraham got up early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took with him 2 of his young men and his son Isaac. He split wood for a burnt offering and set out to go to the place that God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there to worship. Then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. In his hand he took the fire and the knife, and the 2 of them walked on together. Then Isaac spoke to his father Abraham and said, my father. And he replied, here I am, my son. Isaac said, the fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Then the 2 of them walked on together. And when they arrived at the place that God had told them about, Abraham built the altar and arranged the wood. He bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out and took the knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He replied, here I am. Then he said, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son from me. Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in the place of his son. And Abraham named that place, the Lord will provide. So today it is said, it will be provided on the Lord's mountain. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn. This is the Lord's declaration. Because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, I will indeed bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky and the sand of the seashore. Your offspring will possess the city gates of their enemies, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offspring, because you have obeyed my command. Verse 19, Abraham went back to his young men, and they got up and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham settled in Beersheba. So there's a lot of things happening here, right? There's so much that takes place, and it's not as though God is calling Abraham to something super simple, right? God's not telling Abraham, hey, just pack up and go to this place, which he's already done before, right? He's not saying, hey, leave this city, go here, I'll protect you. He is calling him to make a massive sacrifice, right? Something huge. So we're going to start breaking this down. After these things, God tested Abraham. There's a whole lot that happens before this point. There's a whole lot to Abraham's story. I highly encourage you to go back and start looking through Genesis. But in verse 19, God starts making a covenant with Abraham, promising him that, or chapter 19, that he would give him descendants as numerous as the stars, right, like he said here. And he promises that he would have this son, Isaac, right, because his wife, Sarah, could not have a child. They were super old at this point. So by the time that Abraham and Sarah have Isaac, they're like 100 years old. Right? There's all this time has passed, and this thing that they had longed for so long, God had finally given to them. And God's saying, hey, I'm going to call you to do something hard. So Abraham, he said, here I am, he answered. Verse 2, he says, take your son. He said, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. You can almost feel the weight of what's happening here, right? I mean, I'm a super visual person, and so I like to place myself there. I like to be around it. Like when I read books, I can almost paint the picture of what's happening. And as God is calling Abraham to do this, right, all these feelings must be flooding Abraham right now. Right, this promise that was given, all these things that are going to happen, and now God's saying, hey, I want you to go take your son, the one whom you love, and go sacrifice him as an offering. And I love the way that this sets it up, because in verse 3, it's almost like there's no hesitation, right? There's not a questioning. There's not a, but God, you promised this, and but God, you did this. Verse 3 says, so Abraham got up early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took with him 2 of his young men and his son Isaac. He split wood for a burnt offering and set out to go to the place that God had told him about. See, I'm sure this was super different from normal, right? Because Abraham has gathered everything. He's gathered everything to this point except for one thing. And that's the animal that's going to be sacrificed. So I'm sure as Isaac's taking this journey and these 2 servants, I'm sure the entire time this question is racing through their minds of like, okay, well, what's going to happen next? Right? What is happening? Verse 4, and on the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and the boy and I will go over there to worship, and then we will come back to you. I think throughout this entire chapter, this entire thing, the statement that Abraham makes is probably the most profound thing that we will hear in this, because it is an assurance and it is a faith that God will provide. He said, we will go worship and we will come back. See, Abraham had the mindset that no matter what was going to happen, no matter what the outcome was, that he was going to go worship and follow God. See, this is not just a worship of a song that is sang. This is not just lip service, but this is Abraham's entire life. His entire life up to this point, he was counted righteous, not because he followed the Old Testament law perfectly, not because he was a perfect individual, because he chased after God, and he had faith in God. See, worship is not just this time. Worship is not just us showing up to church. Worship is not just having KSBJ and Air 1 set to your radio preset. But it is your life looking like Jesus. It is your life being different. And that is why Abraham was counted righteous. That is why Abraham was who he is described as, and it is because he worshiped with his life. When God called, he did, as we're about to see even further. So Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. In his hand he took the fire and the knife, and the two of them walked on together. Right? This process is starting. He gives his son the wood, and he has the knife, and he has the fire, and they begin to climb this mountain. They begin to make this journey. And it doesn't say it, but as faithful as Abraham was, he's still human, right? We're all still human. And so you can imagine the thoughts that are racing, right? All the doubt at this point, all the weight of everything, just like in our lives, right? When God calls us to do something, it's not always something easy, right? It's not always something easy. Sometimes life is hard, and sometimes God calls us to do hard things. And the only way that we make it out on the other side is by leaning and saying, okay, God, you are faithful. So in the storm, I'm going to worship you. No matter what the outcome is, you are still God, and you are still in control. So they start making this journey up. And in verse 7, it says, Then Isaac spoke to his father Abraham and said, My father. He replied, Here I am, my son. Isaac said, The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered and said, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. See, Abraham knew whether God was going to give an animal or whether it was going to be Isaac, that it had already been provided. Right? His faith that God is in control no matter what the situation is, right? As hard as what this is that God is asking, Abraham is saying that God is in control and God is still faithful. Right? This son that I had prayed for, the son that I had begged and pleaded with God, and the son that God finally gave me, he's asked me to give him up, but God is still faithful. Right? Let's put that to us. Right? I'm here, I have this job, and God is calling me somewhere else, and it may be a pay cut, it may be something else, we may have to move our family. God is still faithful. Right? Life and everything is rolling along and it's great, and cancer shows up. God is still faithful. God is still in control. Your family starts to fall apart and everything happens. Guess what? God is still providing and God is still in control. Then the two of them walked on together. And they arrived at the place that God had told him about. Abraham built the altar, then arranged the wood, and he bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out, took the knife to slaughter his son. It looks as though, as this is written, right, there's no hesitation. Abraham's just doing what God had called him to do. And I can't imagine how hard it is and how hard it would be to take your son that you love, bound him on top of this wood, and know what's about to take place. And yes, Abraham had stated that God would provide and that God was going to be in control. But the Bible says nothing about Isaac's faith being Abraham's faith. Right? There's a lot of people that say that Isaac was okay and he just knew, and then there's a whole bunch of people that say that Isaac would have been like completely freaking out, right? You can take that in however way you want to take it. And it doesn't necessarily say that Isaac was panicking, but me, if I'm sitting there, all these things that are racing through my mind, right? And the possibility that Isaac's crying out and saying, Dad, wait, Father, why? Wait, what's happening? Why? What is going on? What is happening? You said God would provide. Right, a lot of us get that way, right? God, what is happening? You said you would provide. You said you would be faithful. You said that this would happen. Why is my life falling apart? Why is this hard? Why are we going through this journey? Why are we going down this road? Because God never said that life was going to be easy. True worship doesn't come out of ritual. It doesn't come out of service, just lip service or action. It comes out of a love for God and a faith for God. It doesn't come out of necessity just when we're down and our back's against the wall and that's all we have left. It is our entire life and everything that we do. It is every bit of who we are. From the moment that we rise in the morning to the moment that we lay our head down at night. It is worship, every bit of it, everything that we do, the conversations that we have with people, the journeys that we take. Everything is worship. Your life is worship. Verse 11, but the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham replied, here I am. Then he said, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your only son from me. Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in the place of his son. Right? Abraham takes what God had provided, and him and Isaac worship. Right? For Isaac, it was thank God for another day. Right? Thank you for sparing me. And for Abraham, it was saying, God, thank you for being faithful and being a God that keeps his promise. Right? We serve a God that is faithful till the end. When he says something is going to happen, it will happen. We don't serve a God that says that everything's going to be okay, that your bank account is going to be stacked and you'll never worry about anything. That's not who we serve. We serve a God that says when it's hard, I'm still there, and when it's easy, I'm still there, and when you have nothing else, I am enough. I am sufficient. He is all we need. Right? And in this point for Abraham, God was all he needed. As much as he loved Isaac and as much as he loved his son, and as hard as it was, God was enough. His word was enough. For us, is God enough? Is he all we need? Do we truly worship God for who he is, or do we allow preference to get in the way? Right? Is our life worshipers or just something we do? Worship is more than just music. It's more than just songs. It's more than a like of hymn or contemporary music. Because reality is, they're both a proclamation of the greatness of our God. We should be at a point as a church, as a body, where we can worship whether there's drums on a stage or whether there's a piano and a guitar and we're singing in the garden in a closer walk with thee. Because that is who our God is. It's all a proclamation of our King. Worship is our life. It's not just music. It's not lip service. It is everything. It is who we are, and it's because God has created us to be that way. Verse 14, and Abraham named that place, the Lord will provide. So today it is said it will be provided on the Lord's mountain. And I felt it was super important to add 15 through 19 in here because this shows that God is a God who keeps his promises. 15, then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, this is the Lord's declaration. Because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, I will indeed bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky and the sand of the seashore. Your offspring will possess the city gates of their enemies, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offspring because you have obeyed my command. Right? Because Abraham was faithful, right? Because he was chasing and following. He knew what God's will was. Because God made a promise. Guess what? We fast forward and Jesus is on the scene. Because Abraham was faithful, right? God used all these things. It doesn't mean that Abraham was perfect or anybody from his line was perfect. But they were people chasing after God and were righteous because they loved the Lord. Not because of the things that they did, but it was because who they did them for. See, when we accept Christ and when Christ changes our life, when we are different, our life no longer is about us, but it's about glorifying God with everything that we do. Worship. It's a heartbeat. It's a movement. Right? Sometimes it's proclaiming the greatness of God, and sometimes it's you being broken and falling apart and not being able to say anything, but just being still and knowing that He's God. Right? Sometimes worship is stepping out and saying something in a workplace. Sometimes worship is paying for somebody's meal behind you. Sometimes worship is walking through the hard stuff with the people that we love. And sometimes worship is forgiving the unforgivable and loving the unlovable. Worship is the hard things, not just the easy things. So the challenge today, the challenge this week, church, is this. We lay our preferences aside. We lay our comfort zones aside. We lay all these ideas that we have aside and we say, Jesus, I will make my life worship to you. Where you call and say go, we go. What you say do, we do. And when it's hard and everything falls apart and I can't see to the other side, the storm is so thick, the waves are so deep and the valley is so low, you are still God and you are in control, and I will worship you no matter what happens. Because you are worthy of it all. You are sufficient, you are enough, and you supply everything that we need. Let your lives be worship in every aspect, in everything that you do. Before you make a decision, before you do anything, ask yourself, do I look like Jesus in this moment? And will I worship no matter what the outcome or what the circumstance is? Do I honestly believe that God is God and He is still in control? It's easy to say those things when everything is together and when everything is going the way you want it to. But when it doesn't, will you still worship?
Thanks again for watching our message today. We hope that you have been encouraged. To hear more messages just like this one, subscribe to our channel. You can also check out past episodes. For more information on First Baptist Church Tomball, service times, or how you can get connected, go to fbctomball.org. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/First Baptist Church Tomball. We can also be found on Instagram at FBC Tomball. We hope that God has reached you today just as He has reached us. We are praying for you this week. Thank you.